for all the people out there with a dream that just want to be seen. Yeah, my dream's bigger than the average.
Welcome, everybody, to episode 9 of the Be Seen podcast. Today, we have Brad Slavik, a gentleman from the US, a theatre director of stage and opera. Brad, it is an honor to have you on today. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much.
Brad, please share with us your journey. It's a very, very exciting one.
My father, actually, when he was a kid and a good deal of his life, he was a jazz trumpeter and played like in his brother's band and a few other bands until in the Army. And then he was in the occupation force in Japan for a couple of years and basically got a job in the band. And that's how he spent occupation, was playing in a band there. Came home, he became a salesman for a few years, and because he had, and also got engineering background in Rolla, although he never graduated, and my grandmother was furious to the day she died that he didn't. Parents were married in 1950. I came along in 54. I grew up listening to Harry James and Louis Armstrong and Pete Fountain and especially Al Hurt. My dad really loved Al Hurt, who was still alive at the time. And most of them were all still alive at the time. Music was always there. My mom actually was a model at one point when she was younger, and I think she was always stage struck and always. So that's probably partially how I got involved with stage work, was through her encouragement. Went to high school, started choir, started voice lessons. My mom had a connection with a teacher and studied voice for several years. It got me, went through junior college. I don't know what the equivalent in England is. It'd be the first 2 years of college, and then like a preparatory college, I guess. And then you go on to the main college or university to finish your final 2 years.
Yes.
Basically because it was cheaper. And when I went in, I didn't know what I wanted to do. And that's when I started seriously looking at music and what to do and voice. And I'm a crappy piano player. I don't play any other instrument. My father attempted to teach me trumpet, tried having me do guitar. I was never good at really any of them, but I could sing. And that got me into the program there. And from there, I got a grant and a scholarship to a 2-year school, which it's called Webster College at the time. It's now Webster University, which is a fairly prominent Midwestern art school. It's actually much known now as a business university, and it's like worldwide. So it's a much bigger school than when I started there back in 76 or so. Graduated there with what I thought would be a good, useful degree, which would be music education. Okay, but my main interest has always been in, yes, singing, but in composition and theory. And also I had like a really great conducting teacher, Don Chen. And even though that wasn't my field, I learned a lot and did a lot with him. Sang chorus. He did a couple of seasons with the St. Louis Symphony Chorus, which then you're working at you're working at professional A level, and that was, we did works under Leonard Slatkin for quite a while. Did at least one with Robert Shaw, which was just absolutely amazing. If people have never heard of it, look them up. Back in the day, well, Leonard is still around, but Shaw back in the day was it in terms of choral music. Did a lot of that. I graduated Spent a year trying to find a job, and my father keeps hammering on me, go back, get your hours in math and science, and you can get it. They're hiring down here at Chart Plant. Even though I've graduated from college and I was still singing, there's still choruses out there. I was in theater a little bit, although quite frankly, there are points in my life I simply did not have the time to devote to a lot of that. I was still one of the minors I then there was composition, and I was still writing pieces every now and then, getting them out there. There was actually a Christmas, it's a chorus carolers that where I worked. It was a tradition going back 60 years before I even started, and we caroled not only around the agency but around the VA hospitals and all that, all during the season. And I eventually was the director of that for 20 years. Keeping that directing. I mean, the conducting skills came in handy. Compositional skills came in handy because I had to make arrangements, especially as the choir basically, because the workforce basically kind of shrank and got older. So did the choir, and then influx of new people coming in weren't that interested in singing once a year, which was a shame. And also management wasn't that interested, especially after 9/11. Then massive amounts of security came in that. So we were, nobody was really interested in saying that unless Christmas comes around, and then then they want you coming around singing. But trying to make them understand that to get that every hour of that performance takes 8 hours of rehearsal to do that. I've noticed that's something people don't seem to understand in theater, in music. There's a massive amount of prep, rehearsal to get what you see on stage and how it comes out. It's a lot of work, and it's a lot of people working together to be able to do that. It just does not come up, boom, instantly the next day. Let's put on a show tomorrow. No, that's not how it works. Since about 95 or so, I became more active back in theater again. My first gig was actually in King Lear as that was the first when I got back into theater was in a professional theater company, which was I'd never done professional theater before. It was in Shakespeare, which I had never done before. It was a small role. It was an old man, and I had like about 5-6 lines in there with one of the lead characters, and otherwise I held a spear in the background for most of the time. And so I started in theater. I did a lot of Shakespeare in there and learned how to do Shakespeare. Shakespeare is not nearly as scary as you think it is. To Americans, it's scary because the language is different, and the language is semi archaic. It's not really. It's such. Shakespeare loved throwing big words in, and Shakespeare loved making up words. He made up a lot of words. Some of them stuck, a lot of them didn't. But they're still in the plays, and you don't dare change the play. It's not. Although you'd be amazed about how much we cut from a show to bring it down to about 2.5 to 3 hours. Lear I had was one of them. So I did that. I did Shakespeare. Did mainly musical theater in those days because of my voice. It was easy to get roles. Once you start aging out, it gets a little tougher. But there was more straight theater, so I started doing a lot of that. I think one of the bigger roles I was in Dracula. I played Van Helsing. And then a few years later, I did Cat on the Hot Tin Roof for the first time as Big Daddy. I've done a lot of minor roles and a lot of other productions of different things. The musical started going down because my voice tends to really stick out in a chorus. Especially if you want to go loud, I can go louder than most anybody, and I don't dance. That's the other problem is I am a lousy dancer.
Me too.
Yeah, so if it's not like a solo role of some kind, or at least some kind of part in there, I'm probably not very suited for it. So I think about the last major musical role I did was probably 2003, was Titanic. I played Captain Smith. I think I think because I looked like Captain Smith. If you've ever seen pictures of the captain of the Titanic, he's white-haired with a white beard. That one was easy to do. I got hooked up with a theater company called First Run Theater in 2003, mainly because an actress I had worked with before on other shows, she had written a play called The $50 Proposition, and First Run Theater does new productions by St. Louis Regional Playwrights. We do full Midwest nowadays, but the thing is, these plays have to be unpublished. They have never been produced before, and we're the first ones that are going to do it. So this was like their first, and this was their first production, their first season. So the head of the company, his name was Don Weiss, was the founder of it. He contacted me because my friend Vanessa had written this play, and she said, probably get this guy because he can do the part, and he can do it well. So it was basically I'm playing a drunk, totally not quite blasted out of my mind, but drunk basically in the side of the bar who's got a few lines every now and then. So I got involved with them in that, and then because I videoed the production, the founder says, we're doing this next show here, and I think you'd be good for the role. And so, okay, I tried out for it. It was a play by Ron Osborne. It went into off-Broadway later, called a play called Ruby's Story, and then was revised again off-Broadway about 10 years later. And Don didn't like the title, and he says, no, we're going to go to call it The Shattering. It's okay. So I did. It's good. Great role. Older farmer in Midwest German descent. And this is during World War II, and he's a former member of the German-American Bund. Now, if you don't know what that is, back in the 30s, this was the American Nazi Party. Mm-hmm. That's exactly what it was, and that's exactly what it was. And mainly was made up of German immigrants and all that, but also some like-minded people. A lot of Germans settled in the Midwest, especially in farming and things like that, and especially outside the St. Louis area. There's like belts. There used to be German language newspapers all around St. Louis and on the Illinois and the Missouri side, because there was huge German immigration in the 1840s, mainly after the 1848 rebellions in Europe, the revolutions in Europe. A lot of them immigrated to the United States. There are at least 2 Civil War generals that were former 1848 leaders in there, and one of them a senator eventually.
Wow.
Okay, so playing this guy, and also recorded the show. And the next show I wasn't in, but he says, well, can you tape it for us? I says, sure, I'll take care of that. So I did that. And then the one after, then he asked me, we could use a good board member. I mean, if you want to be on the board, says, okay, yeah, I can be on the board of directors. I mean, what? And I think basically just did that. My main job was to video the shows, edit them, ready, because get them to the playwrights, because if a playwright has got a show that's been premiered and all that, it's good to have a visual record. Mm-hmm. Photographs, yes, but if you've got a tape of it, that is something that you can show producers and publicists and publishers. So, okay, did that. So I was on the board for about 2 years, and Don Weiss, who founded it, who was the president at the time, he was having back problems and things like that, and he had been in surgery before at the VA Veterans Administration, and he was going to go again. I said, and I was doing an opera at the time. It was a Menotti opera, I think, called The Thief or something like that. And he's been trying to get me with a meeting and all that. So like, Don, I'm busy with this thing. I'll be around for the first run stuff, but come on, I have a life outside first run. So I said, no, I need to talk to you. So okay. Basically says, okay, if something should happen to me, I'm going into surgery in December. This is December 2000. Something should happen to me. I want you to take over. He says, that's up to the board. Let them board. I don't want to be president. I'm an actor. I like being on stage. Says, nope, I've already cleared it with him. Says, Don, nothing's gonna happen. Just okay, yes, I'll do it. I promise I will do it. I promise I will keep the company going. Well, Don never made it out of surgery, so be very careful what you promise people. And yeah, I was at the time he was doing that. We had just started rehearsal of a new play, and I had the lead this time. It was called St. Francis and the Sultan. I'm playing St. Francis, but it says, Don, you've got to be kidding. I have seen drawings and paintings of Francis. He's skinny. He starves himself. Look at me. Yes, but there isn't another actor that can touch the role. Okay, yes, I can do the role, but my God, come on. I look more like a Benedictine than a Franciscan. Okay, so in the middle of rehearsal, that Don dies, and I have to take over the company and complete this production, which was in January, the month after he died, and just basically I had to learn how to be president. I had to learn advertising. I had to learn how to set up a box office and get people to manage it. I had to learn to write grants, which has been the bane of my life since 2006. And I'm in the middle of it now because nobody wants to do it. At the same time, I got more involved with I got involved with set design, especially because the thing is when you're president and you can't find anybody to do the job, sometimes you got to jump in there and take care of it yourself. That's some of my directing stuff has been because I've had to take over from a director that left, and I had to take over the show. There's only a few times that I've started from the beginning and cast the show. So I learned set design. I learned some rudimentary lighting, but never really liked it. Was really good with sound design, sound effects, writing music, underscore. And I was president for 10 years till I finally convinced somebody to take over. I promised I'd stay on the board and I would write the grants, but I don't want to deal with the day-to-day stuff any longer. It was 10 years of that. And the financial stuff too, because I had to have it, because in writing the grants, you've got to be very cognizant of what the financial state is and exactly how much to ask for and how to justify all of it. And just crazy. So did that, and it says, okay, I can get back to acting again. Well, it had been 10 years since I've been on stage, and I'm 10 years older, and all the parts are, I've aged out a lot of the things I was interested in. And so been gradually getting back. And as it turned out, most of the compositional work I've been doing has been for theater, basically background music. I am proud that I started the concept of actually hiring musicians and composers. I had a group of composers, because I wasn't going to write music for the whole season. I had a group of composers I can call on that, especially at a reasonable price, and they would supply. And the music you need is like 30 seconds long, maybe a minute. Stuff like that. It's got to be scene change or underscore stuff, and basically, if there's a way, if you can either play it or we can realize it. And for a couple of shows, I hired musicians actually to play it live on stage, all the underscore stuff, which was cool. It worked out fantastically. Did that, finally got somebody to take over, still write stuff occasionally. And let's see, I've had a violin sonata done that was derived out of music I wrote for a show about Sherlock Holmes a while back. Haven't done much conducting since there. Singing still every now and then. Writing's been the main thing. There is a secondary group that I brought into First Run back in 2007. It's called the St. Louis Writers Group. It was founded by a playwright, Mario Farwell. And the concept and everything and how he made it work was that they met twice a month, and anybody could bring in a full script. Well, usually it's a play or a screenplay, not novels or anything like that. We're not. It's meant for theater or some type of performance. You can bring it in, get actors together, and they'll read it right there, and then we comment and discuss it. And they've been doing that since. Actually, it's been since 2005, because Don was still alive when this was going on, and they were trying to maintain themselves. And he says, we got to keep them going. This is part of what we do, is encouraging playwrights and all that. So we brought them into First Run. So I have been attending these workshops and new plays constantly for many, many years. And that is an education in itself, because I have never had a writing class in my life. I was the bane of every English student, every English teacher and English lit teacher, because, you're got to read Dickens, and we have to, Shakespeare, I don't mind if you're performing it. Shakespeare was never meant to be read. Just sit there in a book and read. You're going to fall asleep. Unless you know how to read a play, any play that you get in front of you is going to put you to sleep, because it's not like a narrative novel or anything like that. So that's, by the way, that's a whole other thing about, I've had discussions with other actors and even other writers about proper Shakespeare. And I've got my own ideas on that. But anyway, after about 10 years of this, I'm thinking, I've got a couple of ideas, and I think I can. I've seen what you need with structure. I've been producing new plays for the last 10 years or more. I think I can do. So that's where I started playwriting. I started with a one-act play called Amor Ex Machina, which is basically about a person who has an online girlfriend until he discovers that the online girlfriend is actually an AI. And that there's a whole lot of AIs out there, just kind of under the current, not making themselves known, but existing. And besides the shock of that, it's also what's real and what isn't real.
True.
Yeah.
The lines are blurred now. We don't know.
Yes. And that's it. Is she, that's one of the main things over the play. Is she real? Can you define this as a person, an actual person you're talking to, or is it just simple programming, or is it a hoax? Because that's the red herring I do put in there, is that whether he is actually being spoofed. And it was a one act. It worked out real well. It did. God, it went under like about 10 different revisions on it, and it got a partial performance in this thing we did that's called the Grand Center Showcase, in which every theater company in St. Louis, when they participate, and this was over like 3 days, would present at 20-minute intervals something, a play, a scene, whatever you can do within 20 minutes, 10 minutes, so that the people can then, and what it is, they were on different venues all over this area, which is called the Grand Arts Center, and different venues in there, and it's all free, and the crowds would just go from one to the other, to the other, to the other, and you get samples of all the performance, and there's actually about something like 90 performance companies within the St. Louis region, St. Louis area, Illinois, all that, all within probably about a 20-mile radius. Now, I think only about maybe 15 or so of the top ones actually participated in this. But I got done in there. Unfortunately, I was in Alaska at the time when this gets performed. So I've never actually seen an actual performance of it, just basically a rehearsal. And then, okay, that one now, full-length play. I did a full-length play on an incident I had. I read a lot of history, a lot of history, which is why I can go on about the 1848 Revolution if you want, or the American Civil War, or anything you want. I can probably discuss in detail. A friend of mine is actually a Lincoln scholar and an actor and director, and actually I'll be working with him for a play about Lincoln we'll be doing a reading of in April. So I found this curious incident in the Mongol Empire about a debate, and it was between Christians, Muslims, and Buddhists. And the curious resolution of the whole thing. But also, I mean, it was the attitudes and all this is, there's a play in here, and I did. Now, one of the big drawbacks is there's no women involved. And you usually want to have a nice mixed cast. So, okay, so that one, I mean, it read very well. I think I did about 7 revisions of it. And then the next idea I did is, okay, I need one either with a mainly female cast or at least with a strong female lead. So I was kicking around an idea from, I don't know if you're familiar with the saga of Gilgamesh, Sumerian legends. Okay, it is the oldest written story in the human experience. It dates back to about approximately, it probably predates 3500 BC, probably is more like 4000, may even before actual complete written records. And it was a Sumerian story that then got passed on to the Akkadians, that got passed on to the Babylonians, and all throughout the Middle East for 3,000 years. It was top story in there. Now, things happened. It wasn't rediscovered again until probably the early 1900s or so, when a lot of the cuneiform tablets, the clay tablets, cuneiform is a writing system used, for at least 4,000 years in the Middle East, developed by the Sumerians and adopted by other civilizations as they come along. So they're in there, and they're on clay tablets because they're made by these wedge styluses. So there's like a massive library in the ruins of the city of Nineveh, what used to be the Assyrian Empire. And when these were discovered, and it took a while to figure out how to translate them, and this story kind of coming out that was on these tablets, and there was different versions of it and in different languages, and it was all about this great king at the time called Gilgamesh. And he had this great companion of his called Enkidu. And what's curious within the story, Enkidu is a wild man. He's part of the legends about a child that is raised in the wild by animals and all that. And Tarzan. It's okay. He's probably the first Tarzan.
Jungle Book?
Or Jungle Book. Yeah. I mean, considering this is probably about 3,500 to 4,000 BC.
What, so Disney didn't have the rights to it? No?
Well, nobody's got the rights to it. I mean, the story's been around for 6,000 years. Okay, so and he's causing problems with the crops and things like that, and destroying, basically because he's destroying animal traps. So the villagers, they got to find a way to stop this, and they come up with the idea, okay, we're going to hire this prostitute. Well, it depends on which version of the story you get, is whether she's a prostitute or a temple prostitute, or she is one of the priestesses of Ishtar. It's different in each one. And so they hire her, and she has got to get him laid and keep him happy for as long as possible until the animals reject him and he has to become human. Okay, so I said, that portion is an interesting story. Yeah, Gilgamesh and Enkidu, yeah, you got that. But the woman, okay, finally did find, yes, sometimes she is just called the woman, or sometimes she does, but one of the epics, she is given a name called Shamhat. And so, all right, from what I've read of the legends, all that, so I built a story around that, all based on the incidences from the epic. And actually, it's only like the first 2/3 of the complete epic of Gilgamesh. And so I did a play around that, and I had the massage. That's why I had one of a good strong female character, and other that says, okay, this is working out. This works out pretty well. Actually, there's portions of it I'm still kind of working on. And then I had an idea. This was like a year before COVID. And because in the middle of Trump and things on immigration, all that, well, I had this idea of a series of one-act plays dealing with immigration in the United States, 1860 with the Irish, 1900 with Central Europeans and especially Jewish immigrants, 1944 Japanese internment camps, and then 2000. At the time I wrote it, I think it was 2018, and that was on illegal immigrants, but they were actually came over when they were 1 year old, they were babies, and they have since gone through college and all that. They're not citizens, but they're fully adapted and educated Americans. And also because my wife is Muslim and also from India and all that. Okay, a Pakistani doctor, because I'm pretty familiar with that culture and everything. So we've got that occupied me for quite a while, and that is still ongoing, developing that. And that's a big, massive project. Bang, COVID strikes. Okay, well, nobody's going to be doing any performing or reading of plays for a while. So I had to kind of set a lot of that project aside. And I went back and looked at the Shamhat play, and I'm thinking, there's I can expand this to a novel. Like I've got anything else to do. So I spent COVID putting this in a novel, since I've gotten it to an editor and gotten basic developmental edits and things on it, and working on query letter to get it to an agent, something like that. So yeah, this is at the same time that Shanaz was working on her novel, which is based on a play, which is based on one of her short stories. So I'm downstairs here and she is upstairs there, and both of us are typing away, but she types much, much faster and writes far faster than me.
I'm like that. I take my time. I really, really take my time with what I say. But there is the other way of writing fast and editing afterwards, getting it out of your system. Goes both ways, doesn't it? Depends on how you work. with writing, how do you view writing? What actually tipped you into writing? You start as a singer within
Mm-hmm.
an opera setting. Your mother is a model and involved in stage, guides you towards this area. And then obviously you go into acting, which, especially with stage acting, it has that quality of voice, very important, which obviously you've
Yeah.
mastered. So it almost positions you perfectly to be involved in that type of performing. When does the tipping scale come that you go, I'm writing, I'm going to write?
God, I was always interested in writing, even though I had early on no really great aptitude for the structure of writing. Now, plot, stories, I like stories. That's what gets me interested, is stories. Style and all that, like I said, I was the bane of my English teachers. Okay, one of the reasons was I didn't have, oh God, I didn't have ADD or anything like that, but I had a developmental problem in that I thought faster than I could write, and I could never complete sentences or complete ideas as a kid when I'm trying to get it down on paper. And it looked like garbage. My spelling was horrible most of the time. Sentence structure, things like that. Well, one thing is I had trying to get it down, and I can't get it down faster than that. Amongst my mom's many connections, not only on other things, but was also a special ed teacher that was a friend of her, okay, her adopted grandmother. My mother's part, okay, okay, let's go to my mother's story. You might find that one interesting. Okay, my mother is of English and Irish descent. Her family name is Stevens, which is actually Scotch-Irish, and basically through Virginia and Kentucky. In fact, her father was from Kentucky. Her mother, her name was Janetta Ferry. I think we know and basically she had a brother, John, and that is only the solid things we know about her. She was given up into an orphanage when she was something like 10 with her brother. And by her mother, we know her mother was of Irish descent, if not from Ireland. That's the problem. We don't know for sure. We don't know if her actual last name was Ferry or that was a married name or what. Don't know that either. Grandmother, my grandmother kind of talked about it, and they were of Northern Irish, Orange Protestant. And the problem is she would never tell the same story the same way twice. And so this is what I got. This is what I got from my mother. So she was adopted by these two spinster women, Beatrice Bailey, and you're going to love this one, California, Sacramento, Nevada, James. Okay, they were two half sisters, same mother. The elder one was, let's call her Callie for California. Her father was a prospector and a mining engineer, and she was named after all the places he had prospected for gold. So that's why California, Nevada, Sacramento, James. James was her last name.
That is legendary. That is the most legendary name.
And that is where my middle name, okay, my full name is Bradford James Slavik. My middle name is derived from Aunt Callie's.
Wow.
Okay, that part is true. Okay, so so we don't know. So, but Baba, that's what we called her. This was Beatrice Bailey. Eventually, my Aunt Callie died. I never knew her. She had died before I was born, and Baba actually worked in some kind of as a bookkeeper in some kind of business or factory whatever. And she eventually married someone she worked with. His name was Louis Mandel, and he was Jewish. So now you're seeing all cultural things that are entering in on me here. But Aunt Baba had a lot of friends in a lot of different things, and one of them was a woman named Mary Northern, who was one of the pioneers in special education in the St. Louis area. Long time ago, she was retired when connections with Aunt Baba and my mother, she would take on me and my brother, and we went through special tutoring and all that to improve our reading and writing and all that. Yeah, my mom pushed hard. She was not satisfied with the diagnosis on me and my brother, and so yeah, we got through school. So writing, why writing? I should not be a writer. I should not be a writer, and I fully admit probably should not be a writer. If I had to depend on pen and paper or a typewriter, although I learned how to type in high school, I would have never made it because of this cognitive problem of trying to get what's in here onto the page and to get it coherent. Okay, I had to learn to slow down. I had to learn to put down immediately it's there, back off, reread, change it, back off again. This is a lot of stuff I also learned because I had to write memos and I had to write textbooks and technical manuals and things like that in when I worked for NGA. And it's back off, do it. So I can't work quickly like Shanaz. Shanaz can pour it out of her brain onto the page and it reads well right away. It takes me an agonizing amount of time to get that in there. Now, one thing I did find out once I started writing plays was dialogue. The dialogue I can run in my head for quite a while. Well, I was an actor and had to learn dialogue, and you absorb what dialogue structure, especially good dialogue structure, works like. That's something my son's also playwright. That's something we share is we have a very good ear on dialogue and how to get it down on paper. So that's when I found out that, okay, I can get the dialogue down and I can break the characters through. Now, then I had to work on story structure, things like that, and consider that. So I'm, by all rights, I should not be a writer. I'm only at it because I'm stubborn and because I have an idea. Usually if I've got an idea and if I can see a clear path and plan to get to it, I will do it. And I will continue to do it because I don't like leaving things unfinished. I'll continue to do it until it's done, at least enough to my satisfaction, where if it's going to be good or it's crap, and then I can make up my mind whether toss it and then go on to the next thing. Because unfortunately, somebody like me, there is always another project. It's either another writing project. There's either a composition that's got to be written. I've got stacks of books. That's the finished ones where I've read. There's another stack off in the corner over there of stuff I still have to read through. So that's another project. Music's got to be written. I've got to design sets for somebody. I'm doing Shakespeare again in May, at least one scene for theater company that works with older actors. So I'm doing a scene from Twelfth Night, which is not my favorite play, but this is a nice little scene.
Brad, what makes good dialogue? You said it's in your head. What makes good dialogue? Because in screenplays, Quentin Tarantino is one of the best I've ever seen.
Yes.
He's incredible. It's flawless. It's engaging. Whatever he talks about, you're just in it. You can't stop listening. What makes great dialogue?
Tony Kushner, too.
Agreed.
And you know why? Because he was a playwright. Okay, what makes good dialogue? You'll know it when you hear it. Okay, good dialogue, it's got to be logical. It's got to be related to what's in this person's mind I mean, use it as subtext and all that, but it's also got to be related somehow. It's because that's how people talk. Yes, you may start something totally out of whack, out of topic, and there is a jarring to that. Now you can make use of that, but to make the dialogue flow, there's got to be a logical progression of this to this to this to this to get to what you want to say, or to break what you want to say into pieces, which is actually the best way to do it, into this portion here, this portion here, this portion here, because you never want to pound what you want to say to your audience immediately. You want to break it up. You want to make it sound as natural as possible. People don't, unlike me, which I am been talking in big long speeches this whole time, but dialogue amongst actors, you want to keep it to about a sentence or two maybe, and then breaks where it's just back and forth, and especially timing. And this is where the actor comes in, and the director is to time the dialogue on how fast, how slow you want it, and the timing. And I approach this as a musician. And I've one actor I've directed actually understood it because he was an opera singer, and I had to actually change my way of direction to get him understand what I wanted to do, and use musical terms, which the other actors were scratching their heads and wondering what the hell was I talking about. So, but sometimes this timing can be inherent in as you write it, in what you write, but it's got to be a natural flow. You don't want to jar, changing subjects or topics too quickly unless there's a purpose behind it. But it's got to flow logically and naturally from the sentence before to the answer the person gave, and then your response to that. And that's the important thing, because you want to show that these people are listening to each other, and people that listen to each other in conversations, they always, something refers back to what the previous person said then, or maybe a little before. So the conversation, it's got to be logical. It's got to make sense, and it's got to flow. Flow sometimes is one of my big problems, is getting it to flow properly, exactly where to place the words on what you want and when to actually put it in. And that's sometimes one of the great things you got to work on that. But good natural dialogue, make it natural language, unless you've got reasons for it. It's got to be, the entire conversation has got to be logical flow, and you've got to have the total concept of what you want that conversation and what is the point. Where is it going? Because it's got to serve some dramatic point or some plot point within the play. You don't want to do it superfluous, because the audience will pick up on that eventually. And that's when you know, and unfortunately, because once we start going, and that's when you got to take out the red pen and you got to start cutting lines.
I only learned this the other day, but Christopher Nolan, the director, he actually puts his screenplays on red paper so people can't photocopy them. This is clever, isn't it?
Okay, that's a good idea. I know generally they use different colors of paper, because it has to indicate what version of the screenplay, because especially in television, it's constantly the lines and everything are constantly changing, constantly modifying, and a lot of screen work that happens too. You very rarely start with the original screenplay and end with it.
100%. It's the blueprint. It's the blueprint for the story. And it evolves, because I'm sure within your productions in this 10-year tenor that you didn't even choose to be in, but that says a lot. That does. The gentleman who owns the company wants you to be the president. Like, I don't know if you've ever stopped and thought about that. The guy whose production company, his baby, he wants you to take care of his baby if he's to go. That's massive. That's massive.
It was also a massive weight.
Yeah.
I made a promise to him, and he died. Okay. I can't go back on that. I've got to see this through. I've got to keep this company going and surviving. And I did it. I don't think I did it totally the right way because I took too much on. And I spent years now trying to get it to redistribute out. And once I stepped back, I will do some. I'm still involved with the company, but I will not involve myself in some of the management of it. I will not involve myself, with the president, the treasurer, vice president, anything like that. I will not give my opinion on that. They have got to learn to walk on their own without my help. I will help with certain technical things, but they have got to do, and I think we've had 3 presidents since I stepped down, and we're still around, and we survived COVID. We survived losing our original theater. We're still around. Yeah. And we have a lot of cooperation from other theater companies and all that. So, yeah, well, I have done my job. First run is 20. It's 20 years now. We'll be celebrating our 20th season. Well, we've just started it with our 10-minute play festival last weekend. So we're in our 20th. So it's 20 years, and yeah, I've been there the whole 20 years. But I hope Don. I hope this is what he wanted. I've done things I know he doesn't like. He didn't particularly care to do the 10-minute plays, and yet I made a festival out of it, and it's been one of the most successful things we've had. So got to keep going. There was other things about he wanted to do strictly 2-act plays, full-length plays all the way. Well, sometimes we have to depend on the scripts we get in and how good they're. And some of these 1-act plays are just fantastic, and I don't have a good 2-act play to put in there. So says, no, we'll do it. So, I've probably gone against his wishes on some things like that. But I thought it was good of the company, and it seems to have turned out pretty good.
I think you've done exceptional. I'll tell you what, you should. It's difficult to give yourself a compliment, so I'm going to give you a compliment. I think that on a promise of someone in their potential final moments, which end up being their final moments, and take this on and dedicate 2 decades of your life to do it, that is incredible. That is unbelievable.
Yeah. I still wondered, God, should I have promised him? Because it was, I mean, I
got you into the writing, pushed you down this road.
Yeah. I mean, I learned a lot I learned and did a lot I never would have done before. I mean, how to manage people, run a company, basically things I learned working for the government, because taking leadership courses and things like that in order, to get promotion and all that. Never really got me a promotion there, but I sure as hell learned how to run a theater company with it.
You see, it's interesting that it's transferable skills, how someone could be such a great leader in one aspect, in one industry, but not noticed in another. It's ironic, isn't it? Yeah. we overlook the qualities in people. And I believe that is true leadership. True leadership isn't cracking the whip. Like you said, being president is, if it needs to get done and no one else can do it, I've got to do it. It's mucking in. It's being the soldier, as well as all the different roles, because you have to think how they think.
Mm-hmm.
Which is, I think that's the key to leadership, is being able to think in the mind of the person that you're not just managing, guiding. How do they think? What do they want? How do they feel? How can I help? And always helping all areas, but with them respecting you. That's something, sadly, that gets, some people do abuse. I think it's a human quality.
Mm-hmm.
We do, even at times, without realizing it, we abuse, power. But the majority of that cannot be abused. You have to get the best out of people, inspire them, And this term gets thrown around a lot. A leader inspires, a leader does this. But do you do that in your actions?
Yeah, I know. I've got that a lot in those classes.
I've got a question to ask you in terms of, being close to unproduced plays.
Mm-hmm.
What are the ones that get produced? What do they have that the others don't that goes, yes, we've got to make this?
Good writing.
Yeah.
Good. You would be surprised at what people write and send in. And it's not really a play. It's a political screed, or it is poetry. I mean, I don't mind poetry, but this is supposed to be a stage play. Or concepts of dramatic structure. And I have to admit, I had to learn that the hard way by performing, by reading. I mean, let's see. You probably don't see behind my head there. There's a full bookcase that is nothing but scripts that either I have done, I've bought over the years. I've inherited some from Don. There was the person who was my producer after Don died for 10 years ago. When he died, he had a bunch of scripts and nobody else wanted them. So I've got them, and I've been gradually making my way through this library of plays that I'm not familiar with or haven't already done. And it's reading these, and you get a sense of what's good, what isn't, what's good writing, what makes sense. And I have to admit, I'm not 100% great at it. There are some plays I've read that I says, what the hell is, one of them is the one I designed the set for. It's Harold Pinter's The Birthday Party. I read this thing and says, what is this? What's the point? What's going on? And now that's the other thing with plays. What you read on the paper is not necessarily, even though you've never changed a word, it's not necessarily what you see on stage. A lot of it has to do on the director's direction, yes, but the proper interpretation, you got actors on it, and all of a sudden there's new dimensions that just jump out at you. And that's very perceptible in a live performance. And I did finally see rehearsal, the first act. I'm going to go see the play Friday, and the critics have been going nuts over it. They even like my set, which, okay, thank you. But they've been going nuts over it. And yeah, I saw, and a lot of these are actors I've worked with before, except one, and they're damn good. They're damn good actors, damn good director. I worked with her years and years ago, and she directed for First Run. The company president was a former First Run board member, an artistic director, and also he was an actor with us. And I've known him for years and years. That's the other thing. You're in the theater community a long time. You know a lot. You end up knowing an awful lot of people that some of them end up in leadership positions, sometimes not, but an awful lot of actors out there. So yeah, when I read this thing, I would have never produced it. I would have never have done it. I says, God, what is this? And that's something you got to watch out for. That's why when we select a play, it is never one person that selects the play. One of the jobs I took, basically I volunteered for this one, is the chairman of the selection committee. And what I do is I gather a committee of readers. I try to get as many as I can. Now, I'm the focal point. The scripts come to me. I know who the playwrights are. Or at least I have their names and all that. And I collect them, and I get information off of them, because there's got to know some things about them, like how long is it? Is it a 1-act, a 2-act? Is it a short play? Is it a musical? How many actors do you need? What is the mix of the actors? All that stuff's got to be recorded, so we can bring it up so that anybody can at least look at those statistics. And then I give them out to the committee blind. Basically, all they have is a script. They don't know who wrote it. Now, more than often than not, they're not going to know who it is anyway, because since we moved it out to the Midwest, I mean, these are people from Iowa, from Wisconsin, North Dakota, Kansas, and not just Missouri and Illinois. So you're not necessarily going to need to know them, but they read the plays, they judge the writing, and a lot of these are people I know, and I know they're experienced in theater and in writing, and they've got good judgment. I'm trying to make it as varied judgment as I can. It's just who will volunteer and who will still be, because it's an unpaid position. And then I, collect the plays. I also kind of make sure they get them, and I oversee the voting of it. The thing is, I do not vote because I know and I don't read the scripts either, because I do not want to influence anybody, because I'm the blind. I know where it came from. I know who wrote it. The script's got to be based on how good the writing is, on the structure. Now, we have a couple of other stipulations. One is because we operate in a black box theater. Do you know what that is?
No.
Small. Okay. We have a maximum seating capacity of about 60 to 70 people. There's no what we call wing space. Have you ever been to a main, if you go to a main theater,
Yep.
You've got the proscenium curtain and you got the stage. And on the sides, there's side areas where actors can get out of the way, where they can breathe. That's called the wings.
I've been to both. I've been to a big theatre. I've been to several theatres, and I know the one you're referencing. It's very intimate and close. It's almost at the stage. You're there. You're in the action.
Yes. Essentially, it's called a black box for a reason, because it is a square rectangular room all painted in black, and you seat the audience however, and the lights are all over up there, so you can light anywhere, and that's it. And yes, it's very intimate. You are no more than 10, 15 feet away.
It's like how comedians start. Comedians, when they first start off, they're in that environment. It's very, I love that, because I think that there's no hiding. You cannot hide in that setting.
You are naked on stage. Yes.
100%.
And right. And if they want to throw something at you, they can't miss.
Does that happen?
Which is an old joke. It's an old joke. Audiences are much nicer nowadays.
Our cabbage coming out of nowhere.
Right. So we have limitations on how many actors, because we only got a theater that's about 42 feet in width, and that's it. That's everything, and about 30 somewhat in depth, and half of that is the audience. So there's like maybe 15 to 20 feet, and that's all you're dealing with. You only get so many actors on there, and the set has to be able to fit. And also, which means if you need to change scenery, there's no place to go. There's no place to put it. Whatever it is, it's got to be there.
I spoke with a Hollywood producer about the difference of on film and on stage. On stage, it can be more melodramatic. It can be more expressive. On a film, it'd be more subtle movements and
right.
more.
Well, you have to be stage because you are at a distance from the audience a good deal. It's got to be this, especially in the old time. The reason it looks outlandish, because the audience was so far away, you can't see them. Also, if you looked how makeup was done then too, same reason, because an actor acts with his eyes, mouth, and expressions. If you don't highlight certain things to get those expressions out, the poor schlub way in the back on the balcony all the way at the end, he's not going to see anything. And if you don't learn how to project and use your voice, you ain't going to hear anything, because there's no mics back then. Okay, same thing here. I've done. Oh, by the way, I have done film before. I've done film as well. No, nothing. I think of like one or two of them may have been distributed, and they were tiny little minor roles. I did a lot of film for my former college, because they added on a film school to it many, many years after I graduated, and I acted in those things. And my nephew actually was in film school in Chicago, and I did one of his student films, and he's now He's actually the one of the lower staff writers of Star Trek Discovery. So he's, which
his name?
Trek.
That's incredible. What's his name?
I mean, his name doesn't go on those credits that have to flash by in 5 minutes, but he's on the staff there and says, all right, you actually get paid for something after all those years. Says, yeah, good for you, Andy. All right, so good God, where were we going with this?
We're just on hurricane, baby. We're just on that journey. We're just in the hurricane.
Yeah, but the problem is I sometimes get distracted by the squirrel and go after that, and then I forget what my major train of thought, which is a nice thing with writing. I can always, oh, crap, let's take that out. Yes. Thank God for computers.
They are beautiful.
Select, paste.
With what are the different types of plays?
Modern 2-act plays, mainly. 50, 60 years ago, the 3-act structure was probably more prevalent. Nowadays, mainly because so you can at least get one intermission to get people to go out and buy stuff. 2-act structure. No, that is the reason. It has to do with buying concessions and being able to go pee.
Yes, it does, because you go and get refreshments. Spot on. Well, obviously, yes. You know more than me, but yeah.
Yeah, well, that's added income for you. But a lot of it is because, if you're going to sit there for an hour, give people a bathroom break. Okay, so a 2-act, what we call a full play, is generally a 2-act, could be a 3-act structure that's going to last anywhere from an hour and a half to 2 to 3 hours without counting the time for intermission or intermissions. So that's what we would call a full play. And that's generally the time period in which we are defining for our performances to fit in there. So a performance is going to run for about 2 hours. That's usually what we shoot for. Now, the play can be longer, and we have done longer. We have done much longer, which basically also means play needs cutting. after getting the performance in, it says, I think this needs cutting. Anyway, so that's one. That's the full play. Generally 2 acts, runs about, say, 2 to 3 hours. Mm-hmm. A lot of them actually will run about an hour and a half. Then the problem is, do you want to keep the 2-act structure or make this one complete performance? Because you can usually get people to sit for an hour and a half without having to go to the bathroom. All right. Now, next category, at least the way First Run defines it, 1-act play. Now, by 1 act, what we mean, yes, a play in 1 act, you can have scenes and everything, but 1 act, no complete performance without interruption, no intermission, but lasts really no more than about an hour. You don't want to go much bigger than that, because structure-wise, the structure may not support it. A lot of them is because the structure of the story simply doesn't support more than about an hour of performance. And there's some really good plays that run like that, or run the hour and a half. In fact, what was the one I saw recently? I think it was 6. Yeah, the musical 6 runs about an hour, roughly an hour and a half without intermission. Classic musical Man of La Mancha, the way it's supposed to be done. And if it's done properly and everything, you can do it in a bit over an hour and a half and do it without an intermission. That is actually the very first live performance I saw. My mother took me to theater. It's called the American. It was one of the big grand theater venues that used to exist. And this was a new musical at the time. This is about it was on the road company. So this has been about 1969, maybe 1968, 69. Man of La Mancha, I think, is from 1967. And this was the road company on it. I think it was I don't know, it was Jose Ferrer or someone. There was a very prominent actor doing Don Quixote. So this is the very first show I've ever seen in my life. And of course, she's going to start me, and she wanted me to see this. And of course, I start with one of the groundbreaking, innovative shows at the time, because a musical in which the band is there hidden on stage, not in an orchestra pit, which is normally, that the whole show runs without intermission for about an hour and a half. And there's was there full frontal? No, there wasn't any full frontal on this production. Yeah, there's a section in there in which you can, if you do it. I don't remember if that was the case, but it was fun. But I mean, and I was actually blown away, and I had to get the record, and I had to listen to this thing, and that was my first theatrical experience. But that thing was groundbreaking. It was an exception on so many things, and one of them was the hour and a half period. Now, many years later, I did Man of La Mancha. I've done Man of La Mancha twice. I've done Don Quixote Cervantes once, and then I played the governor later in a professional production, and it was much longer than when I did the show. it ran almost 2 hours, and the director wanted to do it without the intermission, and that's one of the things the critics complained about. They says, yes, it was a great production and all that, but the bladder control to watch this, I can see it, because the way it's staged, once you're on, everybody's always on stage all the time, and there's no really way to get off. Once you start it to all the way going to completion. But yeah, I've seen it longer than what it should be, because when I saw the show, it didn't seem that long at all. It was just like astonishing. So you could call that a one act, but it actually isn't. But a one act play, we want 1 hour. You can go on. I've seen them go an hour and a half. Picasso at the Lapin Lagile. That one runs a bit over an hour or so, and it's meant to stand alone. And generally, it's not coupled with anything. It's done as is. I've done that one. If you don't know that play, it's by Steve Martin, and yes, it's the Steve Martin. Fantastic play, absolutely fantastic play. The man can write. The man can absolutely write, and he knows his stuff. He especially knows his history and the characters he's writing about, because yes, Picasso is in the play. Albert Einstein is in the play. Real person. The person I played was actually a real person. He was an art supporter and critic called Zago. This was in Paris in 1902, something like that. And Elvis is in the play, and you have to either see it or read it to understand why.
You know what's really, really weird? When I hear something crazy, I was actually going to write a play 10 years ago. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And do it at my local school, my secondary school. And it was going to include all of these people that you just mentioned. How mad's that? It's crazy. Isn't it? Like a journey. Like the ghost, like Scrooge, where he goes back and sees these mentors. They were going to be that's strange.
Well, get a chance, find this play. It's great. It's a great play. It really is a great play. Okay, so we've covered 2-act full play, 1 act. All right, now next category is what's called 10-minute play, or what we like to call short play, because they're not all 10 minutes. And that is a very specialized category. It's generally done for writing contests, things like that. It's not really performed that often, because it's 10 minutes, which means you got to have a lot of them. Right, you got to have a lot of them. You got to have at least 6 to 8 to make an evening's worth of performance. And there are a few playwrights that actually write that is the structure they write it as, individual small vignettes within the entire play structure. that it's made up of this. There are a few examples like that. But these 10-minute plays exist. Writers write them because there are contests for them and competitions and all that, but getting them staged is not that often. That's one of the things we did. Actually, was at the suggestion of three of the writers of the writers group at the time. And they said that, we write these things. There's no place to really stage them. Why doesn't First Run stage them? And I'm thinking, well, I don't have a good reason not to. And okay, what would it take to make it work? And that I actually, the moment he said it, I began. Usually that's what happens. Someone kicks off an idea like that, my brain starts immediately going into structure, into problem solving mode. Okay, what can be done? What are the problems? How can they be solved? How can this be resolved? Okay, you've got multiple plays, different casts, different scenery. Okay, yeah, those are massive problems, by the way. How do you solve that? Okay, so all right. So way over, and we have done 16 of these 10-minute plays festivals from 2007 until we just finished our 16th one last weekend. Collectively, we just called them Spectrum because I thought it would be a cool name. And then put a year at the end of it, because it is, the subject matter, what's it about? Comedy, tragedy, pathos, whatever. You're going to get the whole gamut. And you don't know what you're going to get year to year. It's going to be different. You don't even know what you're going to get all in the one evening. And if you don't like one play, wait 10 minutes, go to the next one. Maybe you'll like that one better. That's usually the selling point I use. Okay, so a 10-minute play, we define basically it has to be a play. People tend, when they go into this 10-minute concept, they write comedies, and it ends up sketch comedy. Okay, sketch comedy is different from a play. There's got to be a point to the play. There has to be a beginning, middle, and end. Sketch comedy, not necessarily. You just got to make sure the jokes keep coming and everybody keeps laughing, and it has some time of and it does have some type of resolution at the end. 10-minute play's got to have a little bit more structure than that. Although there is a massive blur between sketch comedy and a 10-minute play. In fact, my opinion is I think it was basically best based on television or vaudeville sketch comedy. So 10-minute play. Now, it's called 10 minutes generally. We like to call it short play because the range what we've seen and what we'll put on, say somewhere between 5 minutes and 20 minutes. Okay, so that would be a short play. The generic for it is 10-minute play. The standard is 10 minutes or approximately 10 pages of properly formatted play format. And that's another thing about what type of physical structure on the page, how you want it. There are certain things we like to see and certain things we don't. So that's what we call a short play, 10-minute play. And those are the three main things. Now, next one out there is the musical. A musical is its whole other animal because there's another dimension involved. The casts are generally much larger. You need musicians involved. You need at least one piano player involved if you're really going short on it. But you need a music director because you're going to have singing. There's probably going to be dancing. That's a whole other dimension, far more complicated. Originally, when we started, we included, yes, we'll do musicals. Unfortunately, we never really got one good enough. And then eventually we just currently we gave up on it because we simply don't have the space for it any longer. We can't mount anything unless it's something, I don't know. Have you ever heard of a chamber musical?
No.
Okay. Have you heard of the musical called The Fantastics?
No.
Okay. Or I Do.
I think so, yes.
Okay. Oh, these are what I would call chamber musicals. It's very small cast, one or two musicians, and not only that, the staging very simple and very restricted. It's ideal to be done within a black box, things like that. Now, unfortunately, those are outliers. There's not very many. The musical, when you do a musical, it's got a massive cast. It's got a full band or orchestra, gorgeous costumes, things like that. That's okay. Instead of we're talking like these little chamber musicals, which now, of course, by the way, the Fantastics, which is a chamber musical, it was the longest running play on Broadway for something like 40 years. It didn't close, and I think it was first mounted in 1960. 68, 69 maybe, and it didn't close until 2010 or so, something like that. It had been going. It's almost like the Mousetrap. I don't even know if the Mousetrap is still on the West End or not. And that's the longest running play ever. And yes, I did do the Mousetrap once.
So we have one act, two acts, a 10-minute, which would be a short play, and a musical.
And musicals. And then if you want to stretch it out, then there is opera, which is also its own separate animal, although Andrew Lloyd Webber tends to blur the distinction between what's an opera and what's a musical. In fact, modern musicals tend to blur. What modern musicals are what opera originated as or was playing as back in probably the 18th century or so, 19th century.
What's the difference between the two? What is
musical and an opera?
Yeah, but I mean, if the lines weren't blurred, what's the difference?
Difference is that a musical is music and dialogue. Now, originally, sometimes the music didn't necessarily move the plot forward or anything. It was just a nice song to put in there. Look at the music. Well, the stuff Cole Porter, Gershwin, and Irving Berlin wrote early on. Also George M. Cohan and all that. Those were those type of musicals. It was the songs. The songs had to be a hit, and then you kind of put a story around it. Actually, there's a modern equivalent to that. It's called the jukebox musical. And it's where you take already popular songs by an artist and you put a musical around it. And if you've ever seen Jersey Boys or The Bodyguard, that's another one. It's the songs have been existed by these artists and all that. And so, well, we're going to build a musical around it. Okay, there is a movie. Okay, there is a movie on stuff of the Beatles. It's called Across the Universe, which I love. It's directed by Julie Taymor, and it's absolutely an astounding piece of film. And especially, they're very true to the music, and they're not, because they've changed the orchestration and all that, and even changed how it's done. But the meaning works within the storyline. If you've never seen it, see it. I've noticed one thing, it's kind of generational. If you did not grow up in the 60s or know the 60s, you probably, that's okay. Those of us that did, it says, yes, you got it. That's it. That's what it was. That's what it was. But
typically,
okay, jukebox, yeah, the musicals, that's how they started. And they've changed in it, but that's the basic definition. Music, dialogue, music. Europe, you've got something called the operetta or the Singspiel. It worked on the same principle. The most famous of them all is the magic flute. The magic flute, a Singspiel, is basically spoken dialogue, and you got catchy tunes, as Schickenator put it. Write me some catchy tunes and all that, and I'll put on a show. That's actually a quote from Amadeus. So that's a musical. Opera, it's what we call, well, not exactly called through composed, but it's music from beginning to end, and there's no pause. There's constant music. There is constant either singing or there's interlude music going on to the next scene, and there's music all the time.
Is that what an interlude is? An interlude is music that's filling. It's a filler.
Right. Right. It's either filling between scenes if it's required. Regular theater, by the way, has that too, because it helps cover up people changing the scene.
It's interesting, because you say stuff like this and it just makes sense. It's playing music when there's the break, so we can't hear everything being changed or in that scene cut.
And it distracts the audience too.
And this is the irony, is because when you had like kings and their castles and they'd have fountains, it was to muffle the sound so you couldn't hear their conversation. Like this, it's very clever.
Oh yeah, it's
all an illusion.
Yeah, there is a string quartet by Haydn. And one thing that irritated, again, he worked for a nobleman called Count Esterhazy. Okay, and one of the things that kind of irritated him is that during concerts and all that, you got the ladies in front, they're constantly chattering and talking and all that. So Haydn had the string quartet going, and then all of a sudden, boom, right in the middle of a phrase, it stopped, silence. And then it would continue on again. And then stop, silence. Okay, it's not, there's no historical thing around. He did odd things like that, but usually it was for a purpose. And they think that's what it was, because it was known that audiences at the time, they're talking in the middle of the show. And Haydn did it on purpose to catch him out.
Oh, for them to keep watching if something was going to happen.
Right. So boom, and all of a sudden stops, and they're talking, and there's no music on, and they can hear us talking, and gotcha. And then
that's class.
Yeah, and it's written in there. Haydn did all kinds of neat little stuff like that because he could. He had a lifetime gig.
That's wonderful.
Okay, so that's basically the difference with opera. And now, of course, Andrew Lloyd Webber, there's music all the way through. So technically, it's an opera. And they says, well, what about it's the story is about and all that. That's what opera stories were about back then. What we got in musicals now, that's opera had that too. It's they cross-fed each other over 200 years. Come on. Now the music for modern operas is going to be far more complex. Mm-hmm. It is Weber's music is very good, but it is meant to be popular. So he's very concentrating on melody and all that. And opera, it's not just on melody, but it's also on structure within how it's being sung or performed. It is the harmony, which can be very complex, but it's very theatrical. It works very well. Usually the music is much more complex within an opera than it would be in a musical. Mm-hmm. Far more. You have better musicians when you're paying an opera company and you're paying for opera. Usually that's symphony musicians. That's how also they make their living. They're also in the pit for the operas. Mm-hmm. And so, especially back in the day, but yeah, musically it's far more complex in an opera. Although for a casual listener, Andrew Lloyd Webber, and I would even put it that way too. I would say he's totally blurred the lines into what's traditionally called opera.
Now that's fascinating, Brad. Thank you ever so much.
We've gone way over time, haven't we?
Oh no, we've just ran. I'd sit here for another 4 hours, Brad. I honestly would. Your journey is. I could sit and listen to you all day. You are such a challenge speaker. We'll have to add that to your area. Not just an opera singer, not just a theatre president and director and producer and script finder and stage maker. You're now a speaker as well, Brad. You've got all these areas. Thank you. Have a lovely rest of your day. And to everybody else, stay great and be seen. Thank you.
Live long and prosper.